Great meeting you today. Great joining the discussion. And my background, after early career in broadcasting, I moved over to digital marketing, the internet side of the world, and led two sales teams and part of the executive team at iProspect, early days, the original search engine marketing company, as we branded ourselves and helped the company grow. When I joined, 40 people, $4 million in revenue. I stayed through acquisitions by Aegis Media and 750 people worldwide under the iProspect umbrella and 40 offices across the world. And then I went back and went to RKG, Charlottesville, Virginia, 5 million, 50 people or so.
Yeah.
And was able to put together a model, which I'll speak to, sales strategy team focused on new business and upsell revenue. We grew from 5 million to 30 million over the next 3 years and sold to Merkle. I stayed on with Merkle another 4 years. And I started consulting about 5 years ago, working with digital agency and software companies, working with their CEOs to grow revenue in a number of different ways. And in some cases, it was a go-to-market strategy. It was sales structure. Many of them were founder-led sales focused approaches and making that transition, which is always very difficult for founders to do. And over the past 5 years, 4 of my consulting clients have sold to private equity firms at above average multiples. And I think those CEOs are glad that they, made that transition during the course of their, agency or software company during that transition from that founder-led sales to a larger team approach.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's a good place to start the conversation around is just, I know that it's pretty common to have founder-led sales in a lot of agencies. It's like they tend to know the subject matter best, and they kind of develop that sales skill, and it's really hard for them to delegate that to somebody else. Maybe it's just because they haven't really systematized what's inside their head, and so when they try to hand it off to somebody else, it just doesn't work as well as they do it. So I'd love to hear kind of what you've seen on your end as far as I don't know what makes that shift from founder-led to kind of an outside person leading sales.
Sure.
What makes it hard, and what do you do to kind of help them out with that?
Sure. So when I first started at iProspect and at RKG, the CEOs at that point had already stepped out of sales and we're looking for a leader. We're looking to hire a leader and looking to move forward. The consulting clients that I've worked with, where I've started with the CEO who has been the, founder-led sales, it's about trust. And I generally felt hiring internally over the course of my career, hiring practitioners internally who know the offerings. And what I look for are the delivery team or PPC, analyst, growing them into the role. And what I've looked for are strategic thinkers, strong presenters, and team players. And if you can move 1 or 2 people and teach them business skills, and that's what I do as a consultant now, mentoring those team members that are moving from a practitioner into a sales role, teaching them the business skills, teaching them, helping enhance their presentation skills. Then you can make that transition. And I would never say, oh, the CEO should step out 100% once we make this transition. But if they can have someone building the presentations, doing the strategic thinking about, doing the discovery calls, which is a huge part of understanding a client's needs, and then putting the presentation together based on that client's needs and making sure you meet those needs, all those things come together. But the transition can happen if there's trust, and then there's a gradual progression of, and I've worked with CEOs this way where they'll say, wow, this is amazing. I don't have to create the decks anymore. I don't have to be involved in every pitch. I can provide some thought leadership. I can do work on hiring, some very important positions here. I can move on to other things that are going to help us grow and still be engaged in a certain time period in sales, whether it's coming to the presentation to do a certain part of it or, whatever that level of involvement is, but they can make a transition. So I would say the most important thing is trust, building from within, having someone on the current staff who knows the product services, can move over and make that transition. And a big core of the teams that I put together when I was both at iProspect and RKG Merkle was a full-time, dedicated sales team that handled the business side who were former practitioners, and then a strategy team, digital marketing leads. We called them all different names over the course of time. I'd never have a sales name for either the business lead or the strategy lead. Those two would work together as a team and put that customized presentation together for the client. What I found was when at the end of the presentation, or we were through the sales cycle and we were asking, to be the client's selected agency, I always loved it when the prospect said, "Oh, I'd love for the salesperson, the strategist to work on my account," because they really showed how much they care, know about my business. Then you've moved the right people over to those roles, and that will give the CEO a comfort level that it's in good hands.
Yeah. So you'd break it down like kind of the sales process down into kind of an upfront sort of discovery call, and then
Yes.
have it be like, okay, let's plan a follow-up call where we kind of take what we've learned from today's call and we kind of present you with a preliminary game plan moving
Yes.
forward. Okay.
Yes, that's absolutely right, David. That looking at, when the lead comes in from marketing or the lead is generated follow up from a conference or a trade show or a webinar, then having a series of questions, and I've worked with a number of organizations on this, 10, 15 questions to really uncover the client's needs. What's worked, what hasn't worked? Can we analyze your data? All those questions, what does success look like? What are your top 3 criteria for hiring an agency? Getting the answers to those questions, customizing a presentation based on what the 3 most important needs are, putting together a strategy, 3 to 5 ideas that are going to move the needle for the client, and then presenting those usually a week later or so, and then moving forward from there into hopefully an SOW review, and then winning the client contract, offboarding them to client delivery.
Got it. Does it matter whether the agency's services are like productized or whether they're custom or not, or does it work kind of either way in your experience?
I think it works for both.
Okay.
I think if it's more productized offering, then you still need to show some customization for the client and what the value to them is that you're addressing their needs. So I would say in either case, I think the formula, and I've somewhat formalized this process, calling it, winning every stage of the sales process, that, the lead generation, qualifying, then determining, is it a go, no go? Because when you finish that discovery call, the client may not be a good fit. They may be looking for something different than you offer. And I've worked with companies on scorecards that have a strong number of leads coming in where they need to value, do we have a prior relationship? How strong is the match of us, of the client's needs and our offering, and looking at a number of different factors, and then deciding, okay, go, and then having that core team put together the presentation, customize case studies that are relevant for the client, show vertical expertise, etc., and then move through the process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess my next question is around, when an agency goes to hire their first salesperson, I've heard multiple stories where it just doesn't work out. And I'm sure you've heard those stories as well.
Yes.
what do you see as kind of the most common maybe
Yeah.
assumption and that's like a wrong assumption? And I guess how do you come in and I guess what do you think is the right solution?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, David, because oftentimes trying and then not working for a CEO is why he may take a chance and then say, "No, we tried this before; it doesn't work. I'm always going to be the lead salesperson."
Yeah.
So I think what I found is when they make a hire from the outside of someone with sales skills and try to teach them about their services and their process, whereas have always felt, and I started hiring like this at iProspect, was hiring practitioners and teaching from internally within the
Hmm.
company, teaching them, as long as they're strategic thinkers and strong presenters, team players, because they have to work with a lot of different teams at the agency, that they make that transition over, and they already know the services. And so I think that the mistake that I see CEOs making is trying to hire someone from the outside who doesn't know their business, who has a sales track record, but isn't an expert at their services. And I
Gotcha.
think there are ways that you can try out people by inviting them to a pitch, by going to a QBR where that person is delivering to the current client that they work with, where they're presenting, and
Hmm.
see how they handle the questions, the back and forth. How do they present? Are they a strategic thinker? And then I think that will help you determine, okay, this person has those attributes that would make a good salesperson.
Yeah, and it seems like you could probably, I mean, if the team already has any sort of like AEs, like account executives, account managers, somebody who's kind of maintaining a relationship with existing clients, they probably have a number of those skills already in place, and so they,
Yes.
the amount of skills that you would need to build on top of that would probably be smaller. Like it's a smaller gap to fill.
Right. Yes. I think so, that if they've been presenting to clients and maybe there's upsell opportunities that they've come across in their experience, that can be a good fit. And when I did have to go outside because we were growing quickly,
Hmm.
at both iProspect and RKG, we grew 50 people to 250 in 3 years.
Oh
So
wow.
there were times I had to hire from the outside, and and making sure that the person, understands, delivery. And I would often look for account managers from other agencies. If I couldn't hire within, was always my first choice. I would look at account managers who had been involved in upselling
Hmm.
and would be presenting to clients that I found they were the best at making the transition over to a new agency, um, coming from being an account manager. And whether they were moving into the sales role where they had a quota, or if they were moving into that strategy role that was dedicated 100% to sales.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Um, well, one thing, I mean, you've probably seen quite a few sales calls in your time. There's a lot of tools now that make that even easier. Um, what is, I guess, something that maybe you see too often that makes you cringe? That you would, just like, I guess,
Yeah. Oh,
what sort of
yeah.
feedback would you give?
Sure. So I do watch a lot of recorded calls. And, I have some clients where I would be on the call with them and I'd be supporting them. I may help with objection handling. I may help asking questions during the presentation, and positioned as a board advisor or consultant or whatever I'm positioned as for that particular client. But other times I'm watching recorded pitches. And what makes me cringe is seeing the presenter go on, and I've seen CEOs do this many times, go on for 20 minutes, 25 minutes without asking a question. And then when they
Mm,
ask the question, it's, oh, any questions? Which always gets because the prospect isn't paying attention by then, always says, no questions, because they're doing email or something else. And then the CEO or the presenter keeps going.
mm,
So that makes me cringe. And what I teach in my training sessions is asking an open-ended question every couple of minutes, every 2 slides, saying, how does this strategy compare to what you were expecting? That's an open-ended question. And so getting the client speaking, little yeses along the way, and agreement that, the strategy is along, what they're thinking. They agree with the strategy, that they agree that it can help them improve. So you're getting, affirmations along the way, and that when you get to the end and, you get those yeses along the way, and, fair to ask, hey, based on what we showed you today, you told us these were your 3 biggest challenges in the discovery meeting. We showed you A, B, and C, how we've overcome those for other clients. Would you like to work with us? So moving from that open-ended question in the earlier stages of the presentation to the close-ended question at the end, and then moving from there. So again, to get back to your original question, because this is always a hot button for me, of that cringeworthy moment is just the continuing to present without taking a breath, without asking a question of the audience, because those are the ones that usually lead to, there's a rush at the end. It's like, hey, great, thanks for presenting, we'll get back to you. And that opportunity going into the dark hole.
Yeah, I've been there. I think a lot of people probably have. Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess when you think about founders who have successfully made the leap from founder-led to, somebody internally doing it, what do you feel like they've done differently? We already talked a little bit about, hiring somebody maybe from within, but are there any other things that you would say that kind of make a big difference?
Yeah, I think getting back to the trust factor, that they've made a big difference where they've been able to stay involved, but separate themselves from that day-to-day sales role and saying, I'm going to trust that the team that we have is going to, win more business, sell more, upsell services, represent the agency in a positive way so that they bring in long-term clients. Mm-hmm. I think there's that trust factor. And I think for CEOs who are transitioning, allowing them more time to spend with the client once they become a client can be really positive, because then they're feeling, oh, we joined this company and wow, we didn't expect we're getting, the CEO to be working with us or presenting a strategy here at our QBR. I think that's a much better, more effective way for agency growth for a CEO to be involved in, spending more time on recruiting key hires to help the agency grow, thought leadership, technology. What do we need to do to stay ahead of the curve? So I think when they've said, I'm going to trust this process, and sometimes it is hiring a leader to lead that group. Sometimes it's working with 2 or 3 internal practitioners that you're leading them for a certain amount of time, and then transitioning out to work on all those other things I just mentioned. I think that's the ones that I've seen successful there. So, and I've had a number of examples where, once they've made that transition, they're glad they did, they see the growth, and they know why they made it. And other times, like you mentioned earlier, when they make that wrong mistake, that first hire of hiring a salesperson, someone who doesn't know their business and expecting miracles, that's when they're disappointed in the results and they jump back in.
Yeah. I feel like that's all too common, unfortunately.
Yes, it sure is.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe a good spin off of this question is, what about the founders that have done sales or are doing sales? They kind of like it. But it's like maybe they kind of deep down know that they need to step back in order to really help unlock the growth of their agency, but they kind of, I don't know, they enjoy the sales part so much that they have a hard time
giving it up.
Yeah,
oh, definitely.
Did you run into that?
Many are like that. They want to be involved in every one, and they have a hard time stepping back from that. And I think a key is for them to see if they have larger competitors, maybe, I've spent time with them explaining different models that I've worked with, either in full-time roles or consulting roles, so that they can see there are other models from other organizations that can be helpful, that can help the agency or the software company grow.
Yeah. Maybe kind of appealing to their competition or something like that. Like
Yes.
wanting to.
Yeah. The ones that want to stay involved. I mean, there's always, the larger presentation, the transition, take them out of all the smaller ones or medium ones, the larger ones, having a role in there, presenting, the a long-term client that they maybe worked on when the agency first started, and how that client grew revenue working with the agency, and telling the history of that. I think that can also be a compelling role for a CEO, that, the history of how the agency evolved and helped that company grow over 3, 5, 10 years. There are clients that were won during my 10 years at iProspect and RKG Merkle that are still clients 10, 15 years later. And, that is a testament to doing great work at the agency keeps the clients, but you also need the process of winning them, building the relationship, and then continually delivering results.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we didn't discuss this ahead of time, but you kind of have a particular methodology that you've developed. I'm gonna not say it right, but it's basically you're selling throughout the journey, roughly.
Yes.
Did I get that close?
Yeah. Winning every stage, because I look at each stage of the process in a separate. There's the lead generation part that sometimes falls on marketing, sometimes falls on outbound. But whatever that lead generation, there's that first initial conversation. You want to make a good impression. So the person that is having that first discovery call should be well-versed in your services so they can answer questions. But the goal of discovering, I've often had my teams, I've always had my teams mention up front to the client so they set proper expectations. The goal of this initial 30-minute call is for me to learn about your business, what's working, what's not working, and how we can help you, and make that determination. That's an important part, that discovery process. And whenever I've gone back and done quarterly won-loss analysis, a lot of times if we lost a deal, we can trace it back to something we wish we had known in the discovery that we didn't ask or didn't find out. And that often is something that led to the loss. So I think that discovery process is so key. And that's how I look at that being really the first critical stage, is that discovery call. Then the presentation. What's the message? Are you uncovering the client's needs in that presentation? Are you offering solutions? Are you showing relevant work, that, successful work? All of those things. And are you giving them a strategy that they believe will help them move to the next level, generate more revenue, whether it be a retailer, financial service, travel company, whatever it may be, that customization. So yes, that's those stages, the key stages of discovery, presentation prep, presentation delivery, SOW review, closing, move offboarding to the client delivery team.
Got it. I like that. That sounds, I think it's nice and organized, and kind of works really well with kind of how agencies could be selling much better. So, well, this has been super insightful for me. And I think for the people tuning in, what's the best way for people to follow up with you, figure out if you'd be a good fit for them, or just to kind of maybe learn more about what you're doing?
Oh yeah. I'm always open, no obligation phone call. I love the agency and the software business and the entire marketing and sales process that goes along to growing companies. So I'm always open to conversation. My website is massivegrowthpartners.com. My email address, pwilson@massivegrowthpartners.com. And then my phone number, 781-608-8208. Give me a call and we can talk about your challenges. Love to talk about the agency, software company, where their challenges are. And I'd love to share some ideas with you I have about growing your business.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for coming on the show. I'm excited for people to hear this. And yeah, thanks again.
Hey, thank you for having me, David. Really enjoyed it.
Oh, my pleasure.